Welcome everyone. It is good. It's good to read your names. I can't see your faces, but it is good to be here. Happy Thursday. I'm very excited for our time tonight, and I'm very grateful that you are here. And I'm excited again that we get to do this. I wish we could do more parent nights. We probably should do more parent nights like this, but we're doing it now. And this particular topic and night, it's been on my heart for a while. We actually planned to do something like this literally right before we were sent into lockdown. And so I'm glad that we get to do it now, and obviously different format, different way of doing it. But nonetheless, we get to address such an important topic of our kids and our youth, and their mental health. And so I'm eternally grateful that you're here and willing to learn and also share your own experience, as we'll get to later. But before we get into any of that, I'd love to obviously introduce myself if you don't know me. I'm Brandon Bernard. I'm the youth director at Bayview Glen Church out here in Thornhill, Ontario. I'm in charge of our youth, which is grade 6 to grade 12. This topic of mental health is so important. I have a lot of friends who struggle with mental health, and really one of the craziest things, as I was talking, I was like, we just wish we talked about this when we were in high school. We wish we talked about this when we were in junior high and elementary school, because it could have changed so many things, and it could have really made a difference. And so we try and talk about our mental health and just all those things at youth. But obviously it's become apparent that our parents need help in this, and they need to hear and just be resourced and encouraged as well. And so that's what the hope is for tonight. And we hope that this is a real blessing for you and an opportunity to see other parents who may be in similar situations, but also hear from our amazing speaker, Marianne. And so before I kind of lay out anything, I'm just going to pray. I just want to make sure we have the Holy Spirit enter into our midst, and I'd love to pray over our time right now. And so let me pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for who you are. I thank you that you are the Alpha and the Omega, God, that everything that we are talking about, everything that we're seeing in our students' lives and kids' lives, it is not foreign to you, that it's not taking you by surprise, God. But we also know that you are here to restore and to help and to heal, and we call you the great physician. And so God, we thank you that we have amazing people who can help and who have really dedicated their lives into helping our kids and youth. And I thank you even more for our parents who are on the front lines and really the ones who are going to make the biggest difference at the end of the day. So God, I just pray that you would encourage us today. God, would your spirit move, and would you give the words, anything that Marianne needs that God, that she would be able to speak clearly and just do an amazing job that I already know she will do. And so God, we thank you. Would you go before us? In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If at any point you missed anything, or you need clarification on what we're talking about, please feel free to throw it in the chat. But even better, you can throw it in the Q&A tab. If you look at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. You can throw a question in there. Sometimes I'll be able to help you, or I can direct that to our speaker, Marianne, who I will introduce shortly. Before I talk about any of that, I do want to talk about Bayview Youth and just everything that we have going on, and I'll share a little bit later on. But Bayview Youth, our mission statement is to love God, love each other, and love the world. And if you don't know, if you don't have a student who is in Bayview Youth yet, or will be up there, and so if your students in Bayview Kids, I would love to chat with you afterwards. You can always email me, brandonb@bayviewglen.org. Anything Bayview Youth related, you can always message myself about any of the questions that you may have about Bayview Youth. But we just want to create a community on our Thursdays and our Sundays where students feel like they are loved by us, loved by each other, but ultimately loved by God. And so if you have any questions about youth ministry, please let me know. Love to help. That's grades 6 to 12. Any students, if you have a student who's in grades 6 to 12 and hasn't been attending, or it's been a while, I would love to connect with them. If there's anything I can do to help encourage them to be a part of our ministry, please let me know. I love what we do, and I would love for as many of our Bayview Glen students to be there. Okay, well, without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest speaker for the night. I got a chance to hear from Marianne again right before we were in lockdown. She was in a breakout room, or she led a breakout room at Today's Teens, which is just a great conference out in Oakville. And I heard this talk and I was like, this is so money. Like, this is so good. Our parents need to hear it. Everyone needs to hear this. And so I'm so glad that we have Marianne. Marianne, just a little bit about her, if I can brag about her. Marianne is a registered psychotherapist with the CRPO based out in Newmarket. She has her MDiv in clinical counseling from Tyndale Seminary. And if that's not enough, she has a child and youth worker diploma from George Brown. And she's been doing all this with Youth Unlimited for 23 years in a whole bunch of different contexts. She is all about helping teens, young adults, and families struggling, with a range of mental health and relationship concerns. She's committed to understanding people's unique story and challenges in order to find new perspectives and healing. So please welcome Marianne Deeks.
Hi. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to share my screen with you because then I have a slideshow, and that's way more exciting than staring at me the whole time. So just give me 1 second and then we can start. Okay. So it's good to be here. I'm also excited to be here. As was mentioned, I've been working with Youth Unlimited for 23 years. And under that umbrella, I worked in drop-ins and schools, and then went back to school and got my MDiv in clinical counseling, as was mentioned. And so now I work with Youth Unlimited still as working with youth in our programs. And then I have a private practice in Newmarket as well under the Youth Unlimited umbrella. But my favorite role is I'm also a mother of 3 daughters. Haley is 19 and Hannah is 16, and Cameron in the front there is 15. And so I come to you as not only a therapist and a youth worker, but also as a mother. So as parents or caregivers of young people, it can be so overwhelming by what's happening in the world, our communities, our schools, our churches. And then when something happens in our home, it can feel really lonely, confusing, frustrating, and overwhelming, particularly right now in the midst of COVID. So I think the reason why I love what I do so much is because I love to bring hope and offer something more. And so even if our own kids aren't, or your own kids aren't struggling with mental health issues, it is likely that they will have a connection or a friend that shares their struggles with them. And so by you being here, you are also equipping your youth or your child to walk with their friends or recognize when they need to have help. Just a quick story. When my oldest daughter was 12, there was a boy who really wanted to date her. He was very persistent, got to give him credit for that. But she kept saying no, and finally it went on for a few days until finally she said, "You don't need to date me." And he said, "I'm depressed." And so she said, "Well, people still love you and you're going to be okay." And he said, "Love doesn't beat up depression. Depression beats up love, and the only thing that beats up depression is suicide." So she hung on to that for a few days, and then eventually we had a chat about it, and we were able to talk it through. And those conversations of hopelessness and lack of worth, suicidal ideations, they're all common. So just to give you a heads up, obviously, as we're talking about mental health, I will touch on suicidal ideations and self-harm. which I sadly I think is super important because it's so common right now in so many areas, at least the discussion. So if that is makes you uncomfortable or triggers you in any shape or form, then please know that we will be talking about it. And if you need to obviously take a step back, then please do so. And yeah, I just want to let you know that. So, approximately 1 in 5 children and youth in Ontario have a mental health challenge, and about 70% of those challenges are found in childhood, or they have their onset in childhood or youth. And so that's why early identification and intervention is so critical and can help with healthy outcomes later on in life. So I guess that's why it is really helpful for us to understand yeah, what's happening in the lives of our youth. So I just wanted to throw out this to start, the mental illness versus mental health, because I think it's really important to understand the difference between the two. So because I know you can read, but I don't see you, so I'm just going to read it to you as well. Mental illness occurs when the brain, just like any other organ, such as a kidney or heart, is not working the way it should be. And mental illness is a collection of disorders such as depression, bipolar, anxiety disorder. Obviously, that's just a couple or a few of them, but it is literally something is going on in the brain. So mental health, that applies to all of us. So the capacity of each and all of us to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life, deal with the challenges we face. It's positive sense of emotional, spiritual well-being that respects the importance of culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. So again, just important, I think, to clarify the difference, because we hear, I think, often go between the two, but just to have clarity on that. The other thing I wanted to touch on right from the start is the significance of language. I believe this whole seminar is, from my perspective, coming from a faith perspective. And I believe that we are all created in the image of God. And as this verse says, created fearfully and wonderfully. And so the significance of language and why I bring this up is because mental health or mental illness is not an identity. It's an external thing. So for example, if a client comes in and they say, I'm depressed, sometimes, not very often, not until I get to know them, but sometimes I'll say, it's nice to meet you, depressed, I'm Marianne. When we can't label our kids or teens as being that problem. And it's also not always a disorder. So we have become a culture that is diagnosis ready. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we don't need help or science. In fact, I actually believe strongly that medication can save people's lives, or often get them at least to stand on their feet again and shift the direction that their life was potentially going in. But we have to, I would encourage us to be very aware and mindful of how we label our kids and the kids that are around us, or the youth that are around us, because the person isn't the problem is the problem. I have had clients, youth come in and they have been on Google and they have told me all the diagnosis that they have. And then I'll say, well, what is like, what is the actual diagnosis? And it'll be like, I have anxiety disorder. I'm like, okay. But working through the way that they have labeled themselves can be a lot of work. And once you can break through that to say, okay, but who are you as a person as opposed to this label, is really significant. I was in a course before COVID, so probably 2 years ago already. And this came up as something that is found in some hospitals. So it's a disclaimer that will show up on a person's diagnostic report. And it's just a diagnostic disclaimer, which basically says that they're not defined by that diagnosis. And it's just, it's simply a description of a cluster of behaviors and symptoms, but does not explain how they came to be. It is shorthand method of communication among clinicians and should be never be used as an indication of an individual's worth. And I love that, because I think it's just always good to remind ourselves of that. I'm just going to share a few stats. In any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness, and it will indirectly affect all Canadians at some point, whether it's through family, friends, colleagues, or themselves. Estimated 10 to 20% of Canadian youth are affected by a mental illness or disorder, which is the most disabling group of disorders worldwide. Depression is a leading cause of disability and is ranked by the World Health Organization as a leading contributor to the global burden of disease for persons ages 15 to 44. And then once depression is recognized, which I think is really great, help can make a difference for 80% of people who are affected, allowing them to get back to their regular activities. So definitely, again, when someone has a diagnosis, I am a firm believer that we can bring some sort of relief or change, whether it's through conversations, whether it's through medication, whether it's through therapy, and particularly with depression. Obviously, and we're not getting into the nitty gritty of mental health in that, with different diagnoses like schizophrenia or bipolar. They're kind of a different approach to mental health or mental illness, but with regards to depression or anxiety as well, often there can be relief or help for the people that are struggling with that. Another stat, Canada's youth suicide rate is the third largest in the industrialized world. Suicide is among the leading causes of death in 15 to 24-year-old Canadians, second only to accidents. And from StatsCan down below, youth have experienced the greatest declines since the pandemic began. And those already experiencing poor mental health before COVID began have been impacted even more. Which I did something with our organization, I guess in October, and it was, we were working with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was speaking to the fact that our mental health, the situation with mental health in Canada right now, or Ontario, as we're living in Ontario, obviously, is definitely up, and we're definitely seeing increases within and between colleagues that I work with. So this is definitely, we're seeing this for sure in our work that we do. I include this stat because I think this is why I'm so passionate about youth ministry. 28% of students report not knowing where to turn when they want to talk to someone about mental health. And I know, as a youth worker, and again, doing what I do with mostly youth and young adults, many of our youth don't know who to talk to. And so what they end up doing is talking to their friends, which leaves them in a state of not knowing what to do with the information, which is not uncommon at all. But with youth ministry, we have an oddly amazing opportunity to walk with the youth in our youth ministries and to share and to love on them in a way that is really unique and really sometimes fits a hole or helps them to have someone in their life that genuinely shows concern, who isn't their parent. And so I guess just a little plug for youth ministry, but the significance of this and the importance of having someone to speak into their lives, as I'll talk about shortly. So how did we get here? That's not what this is really about, but I did want to just add a few things, and some of the things that our youth are really struggling with. And I will mention this at the end, but any parents, anybody on this who's over the age of 20 will be able to say, I was a teenager once, so I know what it's like. And I've heard parents say that to their kids when we're in sessions, and I'm like, except that you don't. So, so much has changed even in the last 15 years. So obviously we're in the midst of a pandemic, and that has played a significant impact on the mental health of our youth, mental illness, mental health of our youth. And it's super complicated, and there's isolation, the rise in anxiety and depression, and of course there's loneliness. Plus on top of it, the pressure of grade 12s or high school students is at a unbelievable level. My daughter went through it a couple of years ago, and the pressure to get into certain programs is unbelievable to me, as the cutoffs are in the high 80s or low 90s or sometimes higher. Friends, so navigating friendships can be obviously a significant part. I've heard a lot of conversations from young adults who are feeling really down and really discouraged by the future, by the environment, by terrorism, by what they're facing in life. Peers, some of that is super hard. So many stories like this, but I'll give you one in particular. A girl in grade 9 meets a new girl in her high school who is super depressed and suicidal, but she refuses to get help. So this girl, we'll call her M. M, it becomes her therapist. Grade 9, she's answering the phone. I hear from students often that they feel like if they don't answer the phone, then what happens if this person decides to take their life, and then it's my fault. And so that pressure is so real in their lives for so many of our youth as well. Self-image and self-esteem. I am actually surprised by how many young people don't like themselves, or even to the point of disdaining themselves. And as I understand more and more, it would make sense, which I'll get to in a little bit. And then you have things like victimization, sexualization, poverty, racism, all those things exist that our young people are facing, our youth are facing at a different level than we were. And then the last one, if you haven't watched The Social Dilemma, I highly recommend it. It's a little disturbing, but I do think it's worth watching just to get a better understanding of the impact of social media on the lives of our youth. And they have a clip in there with regards to the rise in self-harm and suicidal ideations. And this has all been since the arrival of the smartphone. I am not against technology. I think it's amazing. In fact, I think given our pandemic, we've been able to do so much that we couldn't do without technology. So super grateful for it. I think it's amazing. However, I do think there's a side of it that has really played its part on our youth, and as adults as well, of course, but on our youth and how they view themselves and how they develop in their own minds and their own understanding of who they are. I just thought it would also be helpful to kind of look at some things that are normal as opposed to concerning teenage behavior. And I know there's parents on here that have younger kids or younger children, and that's great. I'm glad you're here as well. But I did think this was important because it helps us understand kind of some of the things to look out for. So for example, a normal behavior would be wanting to spend more time with peers and less time with family. Especially around the age of 14, 15, what you'll start to notice, maybe 13, 14, 15, depending, is that they will start to push away the parents and then want to spend lots of time with the peers. But then all of a sudden they'll go back to this like wanting to snuggle with their parents. And it's really hard to navigate as a parent, because you're like, I want to keep you close to my house and to my see you or whatever, but it is important that they start to push back on kind of those norms and figure out where they fit in and who they are and all that sort of thing. So that would be normal. Concerning behavior would be when they pull away, socially withdraw from family or friends. They only want to spend their time in their bedroom, or they just totally withdraw from everything that is normal or has been normal. Normal behavior, reluctance to get up early for school. I know our high school, I don't know if this is true, it starts, well, I do know it starts quite late. It starts at 9:30 because it's proven now that our teens need more sleep than because of their development and because of the things that are going on. So that would be normal. An abnormal thing would be an absolute refusal to attend school, especially if the behavior happens suddenly and accompanies other signs of distress or depression or high anxiety. Anxiety can appear that way, that a child would be refused to go to school, which would be a little bit of a concerning behavior. A normal behavior would be sadness and anxiety following fights or breakups with a boyfriend or girlfriend. And then a concern would be sadness and anxiety that doesn't correct itself or decrease in intensity after a few days or a couple of weeks. And then the last one is worrying about physical appearance and trying to fit in. And then the concerning behavior could be sudden and significant changes in eating behaviors, over-exercising, and potentially other indications of eating disorders. And we now know, of course, that boys are at risk for eating disorders as well. So being mindful of that and just being aware of what could potentially be one of those things that to look out for. Okay, so I'm going to slip into just some of the kind of the things that would be most common, I would say, with regards to some of the mental illness or mental health concerns. Anxiety would definitely be the most common single class of mental health problems in children and adolescents. Comes in a different, there could be generalized anxiety or social anxiety, different kinds of anxiety for sure. And the way that it works is it really is the fear of the unknown, the fear of something that could be or something that could happen. So there's an increased scanning for danger, and it really becomes all about getting rid of that. So I'm going to use school as an example because I think it's a good example. It just becomes about going to school, that there's something is going to happen at school. They can't really say what it is, whether it's the noise or whatever it is. There's something about school with anxiety. And so they want to escape it or avoid it. So they'll pretend, they can pretend that they're sick, or they will, whatever, they will just try not to go to school. So we as parents will be like, oh, okay, they're not feeling well, we'll keep them home. And then they have relief from the situation because they, for a short period of time, feel like they've escaped whatever it is that they're afraid of. But then it becomes harder to return because that threat will continue, it will rise up. So actually, although it's very hard to do, one of the best things we can do is encourage them to go and create some sort of strategies that will get them back into the school, whether it's through teachers or whether it's through the office or whatever it is, but getting that child back into the school. So I can give you an example of a client I had, and I had the parents involved because the parents would actually pick up this student from school. And this person was in grade 9 at the time. And so he would call his parents and they would right away pick him up from school. And he was having a really hard time. They'd pick him up. And then it just became to the point where he did not want to go to school at all. And so the parents came in and I said, you have to make him go to school. You have to drop him off. Of course, we had other things in place, but they had to be involved in that as well. And it was hard. But now I was fortunate. I heard the outcome, and he's doing amazing because he was able to get over the hump and realize that it was a doable thing to get into the school, and he's doing amazing now. So that's super exciting. It's always good when it goes well. Depression is the next one. So same sort of thing. There's low fatigue or energy, low energy or fatigue. And then use of coping skills, anxiety reduces to, you just start to see a lowering of the ability to do things that were normally okay or easy to do, or things that were normal. So an unusually sad mood most of the day and nearly every day. So a lot of sadness, emptiness, or teary, a loss of interest or enjoyment in activities that used to be enjoyable, neglect of responsibility, decreased energy, tiredness and fatigue, irritability, unrelated to the situation, difficulty concentrating, making decisions. And then of course the suicidal thoughts can come often, or come with this sort of mental illness. Now, the funny thing, some of you who have teens on this webinar might be saying, wait a minute, that is my son or daughter all the time, and I don't think they have depression. And this is the tricky part about adolescent depression, is that yes, sometimes it's confusing to know what's going on, because we're dealing with mood swings, and we're dealing with the push and the pull of teens, but just paying attention to how long it lasts. And if you're concerned about it, then have a conversation with them and see where they're at, and better understand what's going on. Worst case, I actually always ask clients to go to the doctor just to see if anything's going on, particularly with teens, as so much is changing in their body from a biological standpoint. I just like to know that everything's clear with regards to blood levels and hormones and all that stuff. I'm just going to do a little check here. I don't see any questions. So I'm going to have okay.
You're good. There are no questions.
Okay.
I do have the poll feature, Marianne, if you still wanted to use that, but it's up to you.
Oh, well, I feel like I'm going to keep going because I don't want to run out of time, if
Okay,
that's okay.
cool.
But if you have any questions or you need anything else, just let me know. Oh, there's a question. Okay. I would love to know how I can make sure I have mental health here from being homeschooled and not around. Okay, so I'm going to answer this question. The question is, I would love to know how I can make sure my child's mental health is okay from being homeschooled and not around other children. And also that through most of her life, she's been mostly around her family who are adults. Don't get me wrong, she does have kids playtime, but not as much as I would like. Okay, so I'm going to answer that. Someone else, I think, answered a similar question or asked a similar question. So I'm going to answer that at the end, just because it's also related to COVID. So I wanted to touch on this, the difference between self-harm and suicide. There are some things I think that are important to know with regards to self-harm. I used to hear this more than I do now, but the difference with, or the one thing to know about self-harm is that it's not a fad. I had this conversation probably 15 years ago when I worked in a high school, and there was people that would say, oh, it's a fad and it doesn't matter, or it's just a cry for attention, whatever it may be, which is the last one. But even if it is a cry for attention, or it is something that is going on else otherwise, we need to take it seriously because of how important it is, or how significant it is. Although it is, we're seeing it more and more, it's really dangerous to say it's a fad. And it might appear as if the self-harming or self-injury, as it gains popularity, might become contagious. And I think there might be some truth to that, but more than anything, because it helps many students deal with what's going on inside. It gives them a sense of feeling, a sense of, if they feel numb, then they get some sort of release from it. The other one is that it's not a suicide attempt actually yet. So when I talk to youth about self-harming, most of them are not wanting to end their life. It is literally a way of dealing with what's going on. And we have to come up with, obviously, much better coping strategies. Regardless of the reason, it's a big deal. And no matter what's behind it, it's important to take it seriously. So you may not feel comfortable, you might be angry or see it as another way of getting attention, but it's really important to take it seriously. Emotional numbness and sadness are commonly cited, and it's a way to manage those feelings so that they can feel something. For some, the blood allows them to feel alive. And I think the one thing that's so important about this is that we don't react with fear or anger, which is really hard to do, but with empathy. So if I have a client that comes in there talking about self-harm, often I will ask if they're keeping those wounds clean, particularly if their parents don't know. And usually I'll call parents in because obviously it's significant and you want to make sure that they are taking care of those as well as getting the help that they might need. But allowing them a safe space to share what's going on. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I asked a student who had cut herself for years how she would want to be approached. And she said, I said to her, if you could say anything to people about self-harm, what would you say? And her response was, approach without shock, which is really, really hard because I think as parents particularly, we take it to be, oh my goodness, how did I miss this? But again, the reality is we need to be patient and we need to be really empathetic. Don't confuse the symptoms with the real problem. It's a reaction to some deep internal issue that has to be talked through or dealt with. And I would say with a therapist, just to allow them to have a place to unpack what's going on. Suicide attempts are done with an apparent intent to die. So they may write a note, they may give away belongings, say goodbye. They usually try to harm themselves seriously enough to die. So again, suicidal ideations is um, really not uncommon, unfortunately, right now. And so you cannot push someone into thinking those thoughts. For one, unfortunately, I think most youth, and when I say youth, I mean 11, 12, 13 year olds know already what's going on with this. And so if you have any suspicion or you're noticing, to have that conversation or ask them if they have any conversations with their friends. um, I would think that they would give you the answer if you have that kind of relationship with them. Of course, any sort of plan that they might have, they need help immediately. Regardless, they need help immediately, but I mean, they need to go to the hospital. And so we'll often, with clients that are suicidal, I'll have that conversation, ask if there's any plan. And if there is, then right away, they have to go to the hospital. Or if they're in the office or whatever, then the ambulance has to come, which sounds really dramatic, but it doesn't, that's the way. You want to make sure they're safe. And obviously the parents are included in that conversation as well. So the other thing is beware of opposite behaviors. So they might become suddenly really happy and excited. And at times this is an indication that that youth or person may actually have made a plan and they're happy because they know it's almost over. Yeah, just all these indications of potentially what's going on. And again, asking questions in an empathetic, kind way, just to understand what's going on for that person. I noticed. Okay, same one. Okay. So how do we deal with the teen emotionally things that are going on? So I 100% took this because I think it's the best and it's the most concise plan. And it comes from the Mental Health First Aid of Canada. It's a great course. The adults who interact with youth. And the algae is just easy to remember. So basically what we want to do is assess for risk or risk of suicide or harm, or just to understand what's going on. So basically ask questions about what's happening in their life currently, make sure they're safe. If they feel there is a suicide risk, ask. You're not going to make someone suicide. If they're already thinking about it, you want to know the details because it will determine what your next steps are. And if there's a definite plan, like I said earlier, you have to take them to the hospital, or, well, really, that's where they have to go. The other one is listen non-judgmentally. It is amazing to me, actually, how many young people tell me that they don't have anyone to talk to. So we want to create spaces for our kids to talk. Be mindful of how much you're talking. Don't lecture them or give them advice, which I will speak about in a little bit. And just listen. They often need someone just to listen to them. I really, truly am surprised by how many youth say that they don't want to talk. They don't have anyone to talk to. Don't judge, criticize, or minimize how they're feeling. Treat their emotions as importantly as your emotions are, or which is tricky sometimes with 13-year-old girls because they're up and down like roller coasters. And I have 3 girls, so I can speak to that. But taking them seriously, because at that moment it is real, and they want to know that they can speak honestly without judgment, without being criticized. Don't take rejection personally, which also is so hard as parents because it sometimes is, wow, there's a lot going on with that. And then, of course, listen with empathy. Give reassurance and information is the next one, which means let the person know that their struggles are real and that you'll walk with them to find solutions. If you're working with youth that aren't your children, and even if they are, but we shouldn't, don't promise that you are going to be there always forever as if you're not a parent, because what happens is that they will put so much weight into that, which can be really hard and damaging with regards to trust. Obviously, as parents, that's what we're going to do. But whether it's someone's a friend of your child or whatever it may be, or maybe you're a youth worker uh, in a church setting, in this church setting, then again, don't promise, but you can say that you will walk with them to help them find the help that they need. Which comes to the next one: encourage appropriate professional help. I often ask if they've seen the family doctor. Like I said, doctors can obviously deal with the medication, but it's not about medication always, but it sometimes can help equalize emotions. And again, it depends. Sometimes medication helps and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it could be, like I said earlier, something with just blood work. And obviously, I'm not trained to do that. It's above my pay scale. And as parents, we don't know either. So the other thing I would love to say is just to encourage you to advocate for your child with regards to therapists or people that they're comfortable with. Shop for a therapist that they feel comfortable with. When I meet with parents as well as the teen or the young adult, I obviously will get a picture of what's going on. And then I ask the parents to leave. So the parents and the youth come in originally, depending on how old they are. If they're young adults, then the parents don't. But and then I want the youth to feel comfortable and safe. And if they don't, I actually want them to go somewhere else. I want them to go to someone that they feel safe with and comfortable with and that they connect with, because not everyone connects with me. Which it's not about my ego or my ability. It's just about having that person connect with the right person. So advocating for them is super important. And then the last is encourage self-help and other support strategies. So help them find ways to help themselves. So for example, journaling or art or some form of activity that they previously enjoyed. But I guess the one thing I would say is, I think particularly as parents, that our own anxieties can, we need to be aware of them, because as things are going on for us, or we become anxious about what's going on with them, they'll pick that up. And so allowing them to work through this in a way that is their speed and their pace, and if they don't want to share everything, and then we get a group of people to pray for our kids and for us, and we get our village to come around us and help us work through our own stuff. But again, creating that support for them. I just wanted to throw out, I was going to play that, but I actually don't think we have time. I just wanted to throw out some of the things that I feel like would be really helpful to know as parents or youth workers or anyone who's working with youth. Just things that I've learned from the clients that I've had. And the one is that not every conversation has to be a teachable moment. And what I mean by that is we have a short period to be parents. And there's a lot of things that our kids need to know, because we know a lot of things, but not everything, particularly when they enter their tweens or young teenage age, has to be a lecture. And that's what I hear often from my teen clients, is that they will say, I feel like I get lectured, and then they shut down. So they don't want to talk anymore, because all that happens is they end up getting talked at instead of with. The other interesting thing that I find really interesting actually is the number of students or teens that actually want to connect with their parents, have a good relationship with them, but they don't know how to do it. And so I think as parents, we have an opportunity to figure that out, because they're still in our homes. And so if they're 10 and we don't know what we're doing, or not having that same conversation or the connection, or if they're 16, we can still learn how to have those conversations simply by asking them and saying, what is it that you need? How is the best what is the best way for me to listen to you? How can I encourage you? Whatever it may be, but asking questions. It's humbling, but it's also a way for them to say, well, I don't like it when you do this, or I really hope that you would do this. And it just creates opportunity for us to connect with our kids in a different level. I said this earlier, but yes, we were all 16 once, but we truly have no idea what it's like. And again, from my perspective of hearing from teens, is it just feels like you're not being heard because their world is so different than ours was. My I work for Youth Unlimited. My boss, or my good friend and supervisor for many years, had a quote always that said, "If you're 25, you have no idea what it's like to be a teenager today." So again, being mindful of that, allowing them to explain their world. They know way more about it than we are, and I always say they're actually the expert because they live in it and they breathe it every day. Another one is if your son or daughter asks you not to tell other people something they've told you, don't. I think as parents, again, we have our people that we talk to, but sometimes that can extend past. And what I have heard sometimes is that if I tell my friend and that person's, they tell their daughter or their son, and then they end up telling my daughter, then they're just humiliated and they shut up. They will stop talking because they're embarrassed by what's going on, or they just know that they can't trust that parent. Number 5, I mentioned this earlier, be willing to say you're sorry or that you were wrong. Speaks huge amounts to our kids. And I don't think it takes away any of our parenting strength. It actually allows them to go, oh, okay, they're human. And it just allows them to connect in a different way. And then, like I said earlier, be aware of your own anxieties or concerns. Often when I'm having conversations with parents, their concern or their anxiety comes out because they want so badly for their son or daughter not to struggle or not to deal with these different things. But what's actually happening is that they are actually sometimes adding to the stress or concern because it's the way it's um, being perceived. So, for example, when I was telling you about the client who wouldn't go to school, the mother's anxiety was that she didn't want her son to struggle. And so, to allow the mom to recognize, okay, you need to take a step back so your son can work through this. And like I said, in that case, it was successful and it went really well. And then the last thing I want to mention is some of the things that we deal with, some of the things that we hear are really, really hard. And so I really want to encourage you all, especially in COVID, this whole self-care piece. So connecting with Jesus, if you're a follower of Jesus, and having your alone time, if it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes, if you have to lock yourself in the closet or the bathroom, whatever it may be that you have time alone to really lean into your faith. Other things, of course, walks, being outside in whatever capacity, biking or whatever it is outside. And then, of course, connecting with your own friends, having your own time away from whatever's going on in your home, and filling up your cup, for lack of a better word, just allowing you to reconnect with the things that matter to you, just to have that space and time. So I feel like this is a whirlwind because it is, but I'm actually going to stop sharing and I'm going to answer a couple of the questions that we had. So they came in a bit earlier, and if you have any other questions, then I would be happy to answer those. And by the way, also, if you want to reach out to me and you have a question or you want to talk through something, I am happy to do so. My email, maybe Brandon, you can just put that up. And then, or you can call me as well. I'm happy to talk through if you want whatever clarity or information, I'm happy to give that to you. One of the questions I had was with regards to kids with ASD, and it's hard to help them if they can't communicate their anxiety. So I need to start this answer by saying it's a really difficult question to answer simply because it's such a large spectrum of what we're dealing with, depending if it's high functioning or low functioning. So it is helpful to learn. So I will say this, it's helpful for kids to learn emotional and biological regulations. Many kids learn how to do that by observing others and by listening to their own bodies with things such as hunger, or they're tired, or they're afraid. But for some, it's difficult to identify or explicitly express how they're feeling physically or emotionally. So if a child is unable to regulate those emotions, as can be the case with ASD, those emotions, they can be labeled by you or modeled by you. So for example, you can say, you look tired, or sometimes when I go places, I have butterflies in my stomach and I feel anxious or afraid, and just having those kind of conversations. It can also be helpful to pre-prime a child before going into certain situations. So for example, if they're going out for social activities, or in this case, school, as things start to open up and they start to head back to school, then maybe preparing them for what is going to be ahead and what they might be feeling. But again, just preparing them for those kind of conversations. I know that's a super general answer, but if you want further information, again, Brandon, sorry, going by your last name. Sorry about that. The Geneva Center, there's the Geneva Center in Toronto, or Canark or Carey's Place in York Region. And apparently they have excellent resources. So someone told me about those resources, so you could try that. The other question was, my kid is pulling his hair without awareness during stressful times. How should I help him cope? Pulling out hair during stressful times can be a couple things. It can be definitely a soothing or coping strategy that helps them to manage their stress, but they can outgrow it. You can try to help them find a replacement for the behavior, like a blanket or something soft that they can rub instead if you catch them. Or else something else that provides comfort, but paying attention to what the events are leading up to the behavior. So having conversations about it. And of course, the therapist could help provide coping strategies as well. However, I would also suggest, and maybe you've done this, but seeing a doctor, as it can be a larger concern, and something that would have to be managed through your doctor, your family doctor. And then the last question I had, and someone asked this as well. So COVID restrictions. Oh, did you just put that there? Nice job. There's the question. So I think this is definitely a concern for so many parents. Social interactions are so important, and such an important part of learning how to take turns at cognitive, social cognitive skills, empathy. But the one thing I think we do have to remember is that kids are resilient in many cases. And so again, I don't think, well, I know that there's not enough information as far as what some of the, as far as some of the fallout or some of the impact of COVID is going to have on our kids, because it's too soon to say that. But I do think that they are resilient. And so over the course of going into the school year, of course, teachers are going to know that as well. But I think if it's possible and you're comfortable with it, maybe this summer, at your comfort level, setting up dates for your kids to connect or play, whether it's socially distanced or outside, interacting with people just by biking by them or walking by them. Again, just to have that interaction with people. And then communicating a lot with what's going on, providing safe spaces for them to share their fears or sadnesses, or maybe for some of our kids, it's not even a thought in their mind, but it is in ours. And so this is where it becomes important for us not to put our anxieties on our children, but get creative with parents that backyard movies or crafts, bike rides. They can be socially distanced, or frisbee with friends. Yeah, just allowing, again, those interactions that we can do, because you're right, there's so much that we can't do yet, but there are things definitely opening up. And so being aware of what emotions that we're giving off is significant as well. Yeah, again, that's a hard question, because there's not a lot of things that we can lean into to understand what the result of that's going to be.
We had a question come in about art therapy. I don't know
Oh,
if I can ask you that one.
yeah.
Would you be able to talk about art therapy? My daughter loves to draw and paint, as she says. It helps her a lot when she's angry.
Yeah. Amazing. Art therapy can be really amazing for a lot of youth for sure. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just reading some of this stuff. Yeah, and of course, there's lots of art therapists as well. If it gets to the point where, um, it would be helpful to see a therapist. But yeah, the creativity or music therapy is another one that's so amazing, right? The creativity of what's going on and allowing them to use their talents to create different things for sure. Yeah. Um, I'm just reading. Be prepared for ER and urgent intervention is necessary. Lock up, secure all meds, including poisons. Okay, a person's lifetime relationship family. Thank you. Yeah, recognize that we as parents need professional support too. Thank you for that, for all of that, Daniel. I hope it's okay I say who you are, but yeah, for all that information for sure. All of the locking up of meds and the chemicals, and of course for support as parents, like allowing yourselves to grieve the loss of some of the things that we expected from our kids as well, I think, and just allowing us to have places to speak candidly about how we're feeling for sure. Oh, okay. Thank you, Daniel. And he's happy to be happy to be identified to share and support. Thank you. That's amazing. Yes. And I think if I can add to that, just this idea of our kids are going to make choices that do not align with how we want to parent or how we hoped that it would be, or the desires that we have, and just being okay to be honest about it, because when we're honest about it, we can actually get support or prayer or encouragement. And to walk alone in this is way too hard. So just to really encourage you to reach out to Brandon, or again to myself or Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, or anyone else that you might know, just to kind of get support for yourself with regards to some of the things that you might be faced with or challenged with, and then that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have that support for sure. So yeah, I think we're done. Hey, is there any other questions? I know I like to be timely because I don't want to keep people past what they're supposed to, but
I don't see any other questions, but thank you so much.
oh my goodness,
that was great. It was so good. There was stuff I relearned and learned for the first time. So I'm very grateful. I'm sure all of our parents and maybe some students who were here got a lot out of that. And so we would love to keep this conversation going. So like Marianne said, you can always email her, check out her website, give her a call. Also, my email's always open as well. But we would also love to have a discussion after this. If there's anything you're thinking through or want to discuss, we have this parent lounge. Don't click on the link just yet, or else you'll be kicked out of here and you'll have to do your own thing and sit there by yourself. But right afterwards, we'll be having a chance for parents to chat. Good friends and parents in our youth ministry, Daniel or Dan, Stevens and Polly, would love to chat with you and just be there. They have obviously their own little bit of experience regarding mental health, and so they would absolutely love to chat with you, and I'll be there as well, and love to meet you if I haven't had a chance to meet you. But can we all thank Marianne really quickly in the chat, or however you wanted? If you can scream outside and she could hear you, I don't think that'll happen. But we just, Marianne, again, thank you so much for stepping in here and sharing all that great stuff. I don't really have too much more. If I can do a little bit of a baby youth plug, we have a couple of things going on this summer. Even though we aren't meeting regularly each week, every Thursday and Sunday like we normally would. We do have a couple of events that we're really excited for. Our first one that's coming up is July 21st. We're actually partnering with Summit Community Church, like a sister church. And we're still doing this one online. This will be kind of like our online summer party with youth, combining efforts with Summit. We have an escape room, which has been awesome. If you don't know what that is, essentially, it's a bunch of puzzles and chance for students to work together as a team. Last time we did this, it was a hit. We had probably one of our highest turnouts, and then also students were just like super engaged. And so we would love, as much as online might be a little bit tiresome in July, we would just love to have you there, 4 to 6 p.m. The link will be on our website, as well as information for our in-person event, hopefully, fingers crossed, on August 11th. And we're going to be meeting over at Summit. We're going to be, again, it's another summer party featuring the most youth group game that we could come up with called Flame Battlers. Some of you may have played something like that or heard of it. I think the name kind of explains how youth groupy it is. I promise it's safe, all right? Everything will be safe, but it's just a chance for us to hang out. And Summit has a beautiful property, a nice big farm property that we can run around and be nice and distant from one another. And so that'll be on August 11th, 6 to 8 p.m. Again, I mean, I've already said this, but it's not at Bayview, so please don't come to Bayview, or else there will not be any flame battling happening at Bayview, at least not by us. And so that's August 11th. But all details are on our website. Please feel free to check it out. And if you have any questions, you can always message me. That is it for our parent night on Zoom seminar, on the Zoom seminar. And so you can feel free to join me over in the parent lounge. Thank you again one last time, Marianne. Thank you to all of our parents. If you were able to join us, we thank you, and we hope to see you soon. Have a good one.